Hey YouTube. Today's discussion is all about predicting the unpredictable Supreme Court decisions. We've got two papers that tackle this from different angles. One uses fancy computational methods to analyze oral arguments. The other looks at how justices' votes influence each other. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. It's a fascinating area. Predicting Supreme Court decisions is like trying to predict the weather. Lots of factors at play, and sometimes even the experts get it wrong.
So the first paper, a computational analysis of oral argument in the Supreme Court, uses machine learning to predict justices' votes based on what they say during oral arguments. That's pretty wild, right? Like, can you really predict a vote just from the words spoken?
That's the core idea. The researchers extracted tons of data from oral argument transcripts. Things like how many questions each justice asked, the tone of their questions, positive or negative, and even the specific words and phrases they used. They then fed this data into machine learning models to see if they could predict how each justice would vote. And did it work? I mean, did the computer actually predict the votes better than, say, a seasoned legal expert?
Surprisingly, yes. The models were able to predict individual justice votes with an accuracy of around 73% overall. That's pretty impressive, especially considering that some justices were easier to predict than others.
Wow, that's better than a coin flip. But what about the second paper? What's its approach?
The second paper, Justice Blocks and Predictability of U.S. Supreme Court Votes, takes a different tack. It uses network analysis techniques to see how justices' votes are correlated with each other. The idea is that justices might form blocks, groups that consistently vote together.
So instead of looking at the content of the arguments, they're looking at the patterns in the justices' votes. Like, are certain justices always on the same side of an issue?
Exactly. They found that justices are more predictable than you'd expect if they were voting completely independently. This suggests that there are underlying patterns and relationships between the justices that influence their decisions. They even found that predictability has decreased over time.
That's mind-blowing. So this network analysis approach, it's like mapping out the relationships between the justices, right? Kind of like a social network for Supreme Court justices.
Precisely. They used models designed to analyze social networks to identify these hidden voting patterns. It's a really clever way to look at the data.
And did this method do better than the first paper's approach or even legal experts?
Actually, this method outperformed both the oral argument analysis and the predictions of legal experts. They achieved even higher accuracy, especially when looking at closely divided 5-4 decisions.
That's incredible. So what does this tell us about how the Supreme Court actually works? Is it all about the law, or are there other factors at play?
The results suggest that while legal arguments are important, there are also strong social and political dynamics at play. The blocks of justices that consistently vote together might reflect shared ideologies or judicial philosophies.
So it's not just about the law, but also about the relationships and alliances between the justices?
Exactly. The predictability of the votes suggests that these relationships and alliances are quite stable over time.
The paper also mentioned that predictability has decreased over time. What could explain that?
That's a really interesting question. Several factors could be at play, including changes in the court's composition, evolving political landscapes, and perhaps even a shift in how justices approach their decision making. It's an area that warrants further research.